Okay, it is 9 a.m., so I'm going to get us going. Welcome, everyone, to the Speakers Roundtable and District 44 Creating Killer Stories Workshop Part 1. We are so excited you guys are here today. We have a global audience. If you are just joining us, go ahead and put in the chat where you are joining us from. We would love to see where everybody's tuning in from. I'm going to go ahead and start us in. Hopefully you guys can good to see this, yes?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you guys for feedback. I mentioned this is Creating Killer Stories Workshop Part 1. This is a two-part workshop, so we do want to let you know if you missed that memo. It will be the same time, same format, and next Saturday, so a week from today. However, we do have to have a different Zoom link. So we do need to register for Part 2. Next week, same time, same place, same time. However, we will put in the chat the bit.ly link so you guys can register. I'll remind you all at the end to make sure you register as well. As I mentioned, this is hosted by Speakers Roundtable Advanced Club, which I am an honorary member, not honorary, honored
Actual member.
And my name is Amanda May Gray. I will be your host for today. You're part of District 44. I already see we have some people showing up from outside of our district.
My name is David. I was calling about one of the properties here in Metro Atlanta.
Here. This is very exciting. Speaking of our district, however, I do want to say hi to some dignitaries who are popping up. I saw Karen Doyle, our district director. Hi, welcome. Thank you for showing up and letting us put this on. We appreciate you. I also saw Roxanne Rush, our program director, and I'm pretty sure I also saw Carrie Evans, our club director here in District 44. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We are happy to be here. Quick housekeeping, we got some Zoom basics just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm sure the vast majority of you have been using Zoom and are now pros, but just in case, as a reminder, in your lower left-hand corner, you will see the mute button. As always, please stay on mute unless you are called upon, or of course, one of our speakers, to ensure equality all involved. We do have a mute master, and he will be actively trigger happy in case he needs to be to mute you if there is a lot of background noise going on. Next is our stop video. You can turn on your camera. We would love to see all of your shining faces this morning. And I know for sure at least one of our presenters is looking for some audience feedback. So fair warning, we know it's early. You're welcome to go on or off. That is how we do so. Next to that is your participants button. That should have a little number next to it. It looks like two little people. If you click on that, that will have an entire list of the whole group. Every single person on here today will be in that group. That is also where we will use our raise hand later on at the end of this presentation. So just keep that in mind. Following that is your chat option. You can send a chat to everybody, and if you are just joining us, please put in that chat box where you are joining us from in this beautiful world today. And you can also send a one-on-one chat. SRT's very own Gail Ely will be moderating. She's in the chat, answer all your questions if you guys need anything. She'll also be dropping any links you may need. And then finally, there is the speaker view. That is very handy. I do recommend having speaker view if somebody is speaking, and gallery view to see everyone. You can toggle back with that. Next up, you'll see we have a handout packet. You should receive this handout packet yesterday. I think it was in the afternoon in your email. However, if you did not, we will go ahead and drop it in the chat now so that you can grab it, print it off, or at least have it up on your screen. If you do not have access to it, don't have it, don't worry about it. It is okay. Just make sure you have a pen and some paper available to take notes. On the second page, you will see it says My Ahas and Takeaways. That is the place for you to take all your notes, all the key things that you remember, all the, oh, I need to write that down and remember it later. That's the spot first. And this is something we're going to be coming back to later on. So I will be looking out for that for you all. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I think that's enough of me blabbering on about all of that. Do we have any questions, any comments that anybody needs answered prior to starting? We will go ahead and get this show on the road. I see we already have 85 people. Oh, welcome everybody. I see Al Weisman just showed up. Welcome, Al. Nice to see you there. We can find in that purple. So many people from the district I know. And you know, I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys all someday in person. But for now, it is an honor to be presenting to you from Ackworth, Georgia for this workshop. Someday, I thought the other day, I was like, you know, someday when we do meet in person, I'm gonna see people and be like, oh, you're taller than I realized, because I've been talking to you for about a year and I still haven't met you in person, or maybe shorter. I don't know. I'm tall myself, so hopefully I'm not looking down too much. All right, well, I think we are getting good to go. And you know, I think the best way for us to start this off is gonna be with a story. I mean, it is a story workshop, right? So without further ado, I think we should dive right into a story with Speakers Roundtable's very own Tom Nixon.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. You know, I come from a long line of very clueless men. And there's probably no more perfect example of this than what I'm about to share with you right now. Years ago, many, many years ago, when I was in college, my parents sent me there with a very small but nice amount of money to use for incidentals, you know, for candy bars and things like that. Well, I quickly blew right through that as I discovered the wonderful world of the 1970s hippie lifestyle. Unfortunately, I found myself very quickly with no money at all. I had access to my favorite drinks and my favorite smokes cut off. So I, like all teenagers and young adults had to do, was go out and find a job. Fortunately, right outside the campus that I was on, there was a turf farm, you know, the place where they grow grass and they cut it up and they send it to people's homes so they can have a beautiful lawn. And every time I walked by this place, I noticed there were women working there, picking up the turf and putting it on pallets and getting all that work done. And I thought, how hard could this be? This has got to be the best job in the world. So when I ran out of money, I went down to the turf farm and I talked to the manager, I talked to the foreman, and I said, I would like a job. And he said, sure, come back tonight. We cut the grass and stack it up at night so it doesn't dry out. So I showed back up that night, and he gave me a pallet of my own, and I was supposed to stack it up to about chest high, and I was going to get an outrageous amount of money for that. That should have been my first clue. I looked around, and I saw everybody there just about was a woman. And I thought, how hard could this be? Turns out it was incredibly hard. After about 30 minutes or so, my arms were shaking, my knees were shaking, my body was broken, my back was screaming at me. Those pieces of turf were about 6 feet long, they're about a foot wide, they're about 3 inches thick, and they weighed about 75 pounds. I had gotten my pallet stacked up about halfway. Oh, I was done. Oh my gosh, I was so destroyed physically. So I very sheepishly stumbled over to the foreman and said, I can't do this anymore. I have to go. He started laughing. And I got the impression that I was not the first college boy that had come down there thinking that this was going to be such an easy job. I wandered out of there with my ego very, very bruised. But I learned 2 very valuable lessons that day. Number 1, never, ever say those words, how hard could it be? And number 2, and this has carried me through 42 years of marriage, 2 grown, very independent daughters that I've helped raise. Never underestimate the power of a woman. Amanda, back to you.
Awesome, Tom. Thank you so much. That's a note to everybody. Don't underestimate what we women can do. It's just, there's just a lot going on. But Tom Nixon, ladies and gentlemen, he is one of our Speakers Roundtable members, and he is a longtime Toastmaster and a member of the National Speakers Association. Tom has been, excuse me just one second. Tom has been a graphic designer for the last 35 years. For the last 10 to 15 years, he has designed and presented and worked with business leaders, subject matter experts, and professional speakers to help them deliver powerful presentations. Tom has 2 pieces of advice for storytellers. Number 1, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. It's good advice. And number 2, bad behavior makes for good stories. Tom, I am going to remember that, and I'm going to tell my man that when something happens, I'm like, well, it's going to be a good story. Tom Nixon told me so. Great advice. Thank you so much, Tom, for kicking us off the right way. I really appreciate that. Hello, everyone. If you are just joining in, my name is Amanda May Gray, and I will be your MC for the day. We have a great lineup. We have multiple presenters and multiple storytellers to give you some insight, and hopefully everybody will be able to take something away. I actually think everyone is going to learn something, myself and the presenters and even the dignitaries. I think we all will learn something today, and I'm so excited to get this going for you guys. As a reminder, make sure you have a pen and paper out because you're going to want to be taking some notes. I just know you are going to learn something and you're going to want to write it down. I know when I write things down, it retains in my brain way better than just listening to it. So I look for some active participation, and I think that'll be the best way you guys can get stuff from all of this. Well, let's keep going. Why not start up with the one and only Kelly Vanderveer. She is a DTM, a past president of the Georgia National Chapter of the Speakers Association, and she's here to teach us about using our own stories. Hopefully you guys have a few of those you can reference. Stories are more than tales from childhood. Stories are serious business. Stories help connect your message to the lives of your audience. They make your content more memorable, and they make your speeches more engaging. The question often is, how can we find and use more of these stories? Well, that's where Kelly Vanderveer is coming in for us. She has been studying the art and science of speaking for 19 years. That's amazing. I aspire to be like you, Kelly. And today, she is going to share one extraordinary technique for discovering and crafting more of your own stories. Without further ado, let us go ahead and welcome Miss Kelly Vanderveer herself as she helps you go through this personal story generator. Give her a welcome for Kelly.
Thank you, Amanda. It is that time where we're going to share your own stories. So let us start like this. Why do we even want to tell stories? Maybe some of you already get that, but let's talk about some real reasons why it makes sense to tell stories. One, it gets attention. When Tom started telling his story, did you start thinking about your grocery list? No, you wanted to know what was going on, what was going to happen. So stories have a great way of grabbing our attention and pulling us right in. They also help increase retention. I got a phone call once from someone who became a client who said, Kelly, I remember the story you told about Kathy, and she started recalling some of the content of that story. She said, I saw you do this at this leadership conference. And after we got off the phone, I went back. It had been 21 months since I'd done that leadership conference, and yet she could still remember details of that story. Stories help people retain the information, and it makes our information sticky. So there's just something about relating vague content or specific content to stories that are very, very powerful. And this is fascinating. So they've done some research where they used functional MRIs to look at the brains of the storyteller and the brain of the person listening to the story. And when the person understands the story, the way their brain lights up. It lights up in the same way as the person that's telling the story. It engages our brain in magnificent ways. It's like we're on the same brain wavelength. So stories do a lot of cool things for us. But if you're like me, you may be thinking, yeah, I want to put a story in, but I don't know what story. Maybe I'm trying to make a particular point, but I don't know what story will make that point for me. So today we're going to talk about some ways to find stories that you can then turn around and use for the future. And we're going to do it using the personal story generator. If you have the handout downloaded or printed out, grab page 3 right now. That's where we're going to go next. If you don't have it downloaded, just grab a blank sheet of paper. We'll walk you through it that way. So the first thing we're going to do, think about the stories that you already tell. On the top half of your paper, write down just 2 or 3 words that remind you of stories you already tell. Whenever I hear somebody talk about how they met their spouse, I always have to tell the story about how my husband and I met. Maybe there's a story that always gets brought up on Thanksgiving. Think about those stories and take a couple minutes now and jot those down. And now let's think about some of the roles you played. In the next part of this exercise, what I want you to do is write down different roles that you played. I'll give you some prompters to have you think of some of those roles. But the goal we're going for here is quantity, not quality. So just anything that pops into your head, go ahead and write it down. Let's start with relationships. Think about some of the roles you played in the family that you were born into. Mother, son, only girl cousin, middle child, grandfather. Write down all the family roles you played or that you have. Next, go back to your childhood. Think about the roles from your childhood. Third baseman for your Little League team. Girl Scout. Tallest girl in the entire 6th grade. Tap dancer. Write down some of your roles from childhood. Think of some of your roles from your teenage years. Maybe you were a mathlete or a drama geek or the high school track record holder, yearbook editor, cheerleader. Write down some of the roles from your teenage years. Think about some of the roles from your school, whether it's high school or college or trade school. Maybe you were a straight A student or the class clown or part-time student, sociology major, fraternity social director, tech squad. Write down some of your roles related to your school days. Think about roles related to your work world. What roles have you played? Think back about your first job in school or your first job out of school. Manager, employee, third shift worker, the person that always made the first pot of coffee in the morning, the person who brought in donuts on Friday, the holiday party planner. Write down some of your roles from your work environment. Think about some of the roles you play at home. Maybe you are the garbage taker-outer, or the grocery shopper, the interior decorator, the bill payer, the disciplinarian with the kids, the fun parent, the pet owner. What are some of your roles related to home? What are some of your roles related to your hobbies? Photographer, model train collector, cyclist, scrapbooker, mixed doubles, tennis champion, gardener. Write down roles related to your hobbies. And how about some of your other interests? Maybe Sunday school teacher or soccer coach for your daughter's team. Maybe you're a leader in a civic organization, a member of a professional association, dog show judge. Write down different roles related to other areas of interest. Toastmaster, DTM. And other roles that maybe don't fit neatly into a particular box, but other roles that you've played in your life. Go ahead and jot those down too. Okay, so you should have a bunch of roles written down on your paper. What I'd like you to do next is randomly choose 3 of those roles. So close your eyes, wiggle your finger over your paper, and drop it on one of those roles, and then circle that role. And do that again for the next one and for the next one until you have 3 roles that are circled. So randomly choose those 3 roles. Okay, so now turn to the next page, page 4, and you'll notice there's a group of words up there. Now, some of you, I said, just grab a blank sheet of paper if you don't have the handout. For the people that have the handout, go ahead and do the same thing. Close your eyes and randomly choose 3 of these words. If you didn't have that handout, write the words down, these 3 words down: conflict, discovery, decision. Conflict, discovery, decision. And now what you're going to do is you're going to create 3 word pairs. So you take one of the roles that you wrote down and pair it with one of the words that you circled on page 4, or the word conflict. Take the second role and pair it up with the second word, or discovery. And then take the third role and pair it up with the third word you chose, decision. So what you have are 3 random word pairs. Look at those 3 random word pairs. Is something coming to mind about them? Now choose the one that you think is the most interesting pair. The one that you think somebody else might find interesting too. And as you look at those 2 words, does it remind you of a particular time, a specific time in your life where something happened related to that role and related to that trigger word that you chose on page 4? So thinking about that specific story that is coming to mind, we're going to tell that story using a framework called the hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey has been around for eons, and you've seen it time and time again in movies and in books when people are telling stories. So it looks a little like this. The hero goes on some kind of a quest. There's some kind of objective that they're trying to obtain. Then they come across some kind of obstacles that get in the way of obtaining their goal. They come to some kind of a resolution with regards to what's going on, And because they've been on this quest, on this journey, they have taken away some new wisdom. And when we listen to their story, even though we weren't that hero, and even though we didn't go on that journey, the new wisdom that that hero learned, there's some kind of a universal truth that we pull out of that story. So in Tom's example today, his quest was for drinks and smokes. He needed a little more money for drinks and smokes. He had an obstacle. He didn't have enough money to get the drinks and smokes he desired. So he went and sought a job, and it was not as easy as he thought. And he shared with us some new wisdom that he took away from that experience. And as we're listening to his story, we can maybe relate it back to some of the things that we've encountered in our lives, that things are not always as easy as they appear, and that we shouldn't underestimate people. So he's used that hero's journey framework for us. So this is the time where I need a volunteer. I need somebody who's willing to take themselves off of mute and willing to play along with me, trying to tell a story using the hero's journey framework. So if you want to raise your hand, like physically, I may not see you. Okay, I see somebody. William, seems like William has raised his hand. William, if you will unmute yourself.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, William, for volunteering. So we're going to walk you through the same framework that we just did. So William, you have those, what are your two word pairs?
Let's see, Harvard and conflict.
What was the first word?
Well, I guess I put a name in, but it should be, I guess, choice and conflict, conflict.
So what's the role that you were playing? So the word pairs need to be the role and then one of those other words.
Well, the role is I was son. It was a family role. I was the son.
You were the son. And what's the second word? Conflict?
Yes.
Okay. So did you think about a specific time as a son where there was a conflict?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us, what was your quest? What was the thing that you were trying to obtain as that son?
I was trying to not tell the story that my dad told me I must not tell.
Okay. So you were trying not to repeat something that your dad didn't want you to repeat.
Yes.
Okay. And so what were your obstacles in not trying to repeat this story?
A whipping when I got back to the store. Something happened that everybody in the neighborhood knew that I knew about, and it was not telling when I left the store.
Can you give us a little more information so we can get a little clearer picture on what was going on?
Well, my uncle was a surgeon. Dad worked the coal mine, sent him to medical school. A man in our neighborhood got drunk and got his arm cut off. We didn't have a place in the 5-bed hospital to store the arm, so they brought it to the store and hid it in the meat cooler.
Okay, and your goal was not to tell that story, that it was hidden in the meat cooler.
Yes.
Okay, and so what were the obstacles that came across in not wanting to reveal that information?
Well, I left the store. I had sworn a sacred oath. My brother was 8, I was 10. We were sworn to never tell anybody. So we went out and found every kid in the neighborhood that we could find and tell them that the arm was hidden in the meat cooler under the pickled pimento loaf and the souse meat.
Okay. So so what was the resolution that you had in this? What ended up happening with that?
We gave up all moral imperatives and told every kid in the neighborhood.
Okay, so what was the new wisdom that you learned from this experience?
It was worth it.
It was worth it. Okay. All right. And so what is a universal truth that maybe the rest of us can take away from this particular story?
Sometimes a good story cannot be withheld.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, William. Let's give William a virtual round of applause for participating. You can go ahead and mute yourself again, William. Thank you. All right. So the story that William was telling, he saw how he laid it out using kind of the framework that we were talking about. I have a question for you. When I was asking him about the new wisdom, and when I was asking him about the universal truth, did anybody else have a different point that they thought that the story made? Whoops. Sorry, I did not mean to stop sharing. Let me do that. Did anybody, if you want to unmute yourself and say another point that you thought that story made.
Secrets are never secrets.
Okay, secrets are never secrets. Anybody else think of something else?
People are genuinely curious.
Great, great. And so those are just two examples. The wonderful thing about a great story is that it can make multiple points. It can make multiple points. And you saw Tom do that with his story this morning. He made multiple points about what he learned in that experience in his youth. So as we think about stories, one of the important things I think is to create a story file. What I mean by a story file is somewhere that you can, we created one story here, at least one, you chose one, but you could take all of these roles and create more stories, but you want to capture those stories somewhere so that you can find them later when you want to use them. I just have a Word document that's on my desktop, and when I do an exercise like this and I come up with some more stories, or something happens to me and I have a new story to tell, I just go to the Word document and I write it 2 or 3 sentences to remind me of that story. Other people get something more elaborate. They have databases and keywords and all that stuff. So whatever works for you, but capture those, the ones that you thought of today and more that you can come up with. But there are some things that I think are important when it comes to stories. And one is you need to have a point. I was doing one of these workshops once, and a guy came up to me afterwards and said, I used to think I hated stories, but then I realized what my problem was. My first boss used to tell stories all the time, and he never had a point. So if you're going to include a story, make sure you have a point to the story and delay that and convey that to your audience. The second is, the longer the story, the bigger the payoff has to be. So we want to get our stories tight and short. If they go on for a long time, they really need to have a lot of value on the other side. And specifics, the more specifics using names and numbers, that makes the story more real. So for instance, I talked about the woman that came to me after the conference and relayed the story. I said 21 months. I could have said about 2 years, but no, I used specifically 21 months to make the point and more valuable and more believable. And the final point I want to make is you don't need to be the hero of every story. And there are 2 ways that you can not be the hero of every story. The first is to make somebody else the hero of the story. Maybe it's the person that taught you that important lesson. Maybe it is a colleague or a coworker that did something awesome. Make them the hero of the story. And the second way is to tell stories where we don't look so good. This is a picture of me when I didn't look quite so good in helmet hair. Tom did a great example of that today too, telling a story where he was the one that had the lessons to learn because he didn't do things. He wasn't as manly as we know he is. All right. So now is the time to tell your stories. We don't have time in this workshop to practice what we did here. So here's my challenge for you with the homework. 1, create your own story file. Whether you do that electronically or you just get a journal and you start writing those in. And what I do when I have a point I want to make and I'm not sure what story to use, I go through my story file and I say, oh, that story, that would make my point perfectly. And the second thing is to apply the hero's journey to your stories. And we've got that in the worksheet in the homework page too. Using those questions like I did with William. What was your quest? What were your obstacles? What was your resolution? What did you learn? And then how can I apply this in ways that'll mean things to other people? So that is the end of this framework using the personal story generator to develop and find your own stories. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That was fantastic. Did you guys learn something? Because I already have multiple takeaways and ahas. And I just want to make a point. She said a great thing. A great story can make multiple points. And I think that's so true. I love how you showed us different points of view. And I think that's a good takeaway as well, is to remember that you can use your Toastmasters Club to give a story and then ask for feedback on what they thought the point was. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm trying to write a speech and I'm trying to think of a story that goes with it, or I have a really awesome story, but I can't figure out what is the point. And so it's great to take that story to your fellow Toastmasters, to your club, maybe to other clubs, and get different points of view. And frankly, that story file idea is brilliant, because I can't always think of something to insert, but I know I need to put stories in my speeches, and it's just like it's like a brain freeze when you try to do these things. So I know for sure, I think I'm going to make myself a Google Drive so that even if I'm out and about, I can put something down in my phone and just have it all in one place. So Kelly, you just like blew my mind, and I'm so grateful for you for that. I can't wait to start that up. So I hope you guys are learning some stuff today, but we have more to learn. I don't know if you guys know, but we have special guests here that are going to teach you even more information. So I think we should just keep moving right along. Our next wonderful presenter is none other than Ron Chapman with a toolkit for storytelling. Many of you know that Ron Chapman is Georgia's only accredited speaker, although I'm guessing there may be a few people on this call that are gunning for you. However, you guys might not know that he is also a 5-time district champion, including storytelling and tall tales. So what? Isn't the real thing whether or not Ron's going to give us some value today? Well, with that, Ron, take it away.
So what? What a perfect introduction for a guy like me, and a perfect introduction for the content. I'd like to call your attention to page 5 of the handout packet. And hopefully you've downloaded that or printed it. And if not, I'll be giving you a few tips along the way for writing notes to yourself. But essentially what you're going to find about this so what on the handout is that I start with 2 really important points, which buttress what Kelly just said when she said you have to have a point. Those 2 starting points for our purposes are, you better give value to the audience, because if you're not meeting their needs and wants, you better be asking why you're using that stage or telling that story, because you're not using the space appropriately. The point is to be of value to the audience. In order to do that, we got to have a point, which we're going to talk about, and we need to have a through line, a means by which we can get people through the content. So those are our 2 items. What you'll see as an overview in the kit is first we start with appraising the needs of an audience. This is really important because most of us just want to tell a story. Whether or not it meets anybody's needs is something secondary. So we need to think about the needs and wants of an audience, the desires that they have. Then we need to play a little bit, which Kelly was showing us how to play with ideas about what might fit that need. Eventually, we have to get to an outcome, a takeaway. Why in the world is this story going to go where it needs to go for their benefit? Then we can step back and we can craft the beginning. We start with the end in mind so that we can then create a beginning. Then the work, as shown in point 4 in the handout, is the ways we think about, and again, Kelly was referencing this, the ways we construct the through line to get someone from a beginning to an end. And in fact, this toolkit is a through line for my presentation so that you can follow along with me. It's one more way to learn and grow. And in the end, we have a lot of fine-tuning work we have to do. So that's the summary. Let me give you an analogy that works really well. Let's say you want to take a vacation because you need a vacation. That's an outcome. You pick a spot, Boston, because Boston's a cool place to visit. That's an end point, a destination to fulfill the desired outcome. You're going to have to pick a starting point, but you're going to have to think a lot about what the possibilities are: trains, planes, automobiles. Let's say a plane. You live in Southern California, like one of our guests from Sacramento. Who knows what airport you might fly out of, but you've got to pick a starting point. And then you have to determine a trajectory, although actually people other than you on that plane determine that, the pilot, air traffic control. It might be more or less a straight line. It might curve up over Canada because you have to avoid systems, storm systems. There's not a right path. There's a constructed path, an intentional path. And along that way, you do certain things so that that path realizes its potential. So that's the analogy. Let's jump into how we think about this. Let's start with needs and wants of an audience. Now, let me tell you what I did for today's presentation, because I think I have a sense of this audience. You want to learn, pretty much a given. Very likely you'd like to be engaged. So that's something I need to be thinking about. You probably want to be entertained by me or by others, because entertainment is like a lubricant for any material. You also probably need something to help you practice. Kelly just gave you one. This toolkit is one. You're going to get more of these to help you go to practice, because in the end, if we don't get learning into practice, we failed. So really, the big outcome here is not the content. It's to get the content into your practice, which is what each of us are working to do. So if that's sort of the way we built it, when you start thinking about a story, what need would you fulfill for an audience? Go ahead and drop your thoughts into the chat box. Let's just see what you got. What need for an audience would your story fulfill? Laughter, Jeannie, absolutely. Just to engage the audience, I might ask the question, to what end? To be entertained. Inspiration is a very common story outcome. New information, absolutely, to inform, to empathize, to create a space for empathy, tapping their emotions. See, this is all beautiful stuff. This is thinking about what the audience needs before you build your story, because the key is it's got to meet their needs, else you're wasting the space. So once we've determined some needs, which we can do by this audience interaction, I can actually adapt to what I've seen here. Maybe because I know the audience, I could ask someone who knows the audience. I could ask Roxanne or Karen if I didn't know. They'd tell me about the audience. I could even do some research. So that's my starting point. Then this is the hard one. What's the takeaway? What's that point Kelly was pointing us towards? I already told you what mine is for the presentation. It's to give you a kit and all the information to actually take knowledge to practice. That's my take home for you. For your story, again, let's use the chat, the story you're working on or story you might work on. What might be the take home for the audience? What would you want them to walk away with? What's the ask? What's the action that would follow? How do you know that they've used your story to be open to thinking differently? Excellent. That there's a lesson learned? Absolutely. A new perspective or opinion. To be willing to compromise, great one, AC. To feel better about oneself, that could be either for the speaker or for the recipient, couldn't it, Amy? Yeah, so these are like Boston, like very specific things that you're headed towards. And being clear on this, to learn to laugh at yourself, one of my favorites, Janelle. Self-awareness, another one of my favorites. That's core to a lot of the work that I do. So what we've done is we've thought, what does this audience need? What's my take home? And using Kelly's tools, it's okay to make an error. Right on, Catherine. You must have had your coffee by now, it appears, because you're in the game now. Catherine signed on early. She's out in Sacramento, and she said she needed coffee before she could be engaged. So we play with these ideas about meeting audience needs and what the outcome is we're walking out of here with, because your story needs to have that point. Again, calling back to Kelly's material. Once we've done that, we pick a starting point. Any starting point will do as long as it's a good starting point. Now, I want to give you a tip about a piece that's often overlooked, and that's your intro. Let me reread the intro that I had Amanda use on me. because it was deliberately built for these purposes. As many of you know, Ron Chapman, let me camp this up. As many of you know, Ron Chapman is Georgia's only accredited speaker. However, you may not know, he is also a 5-time district champion, including storytelling and tall tales. What a guy he is. So what? Why should I give a damn? Isn't the real question what he's going to deliver for us today? Okay, Ron, do your thing. So what I did in that short time was I gave you a very simple set of credentials, which gives you a reason to think I know what I'm talking about. If you go on for 5 minutes about your credentials, you are abusing the audience. You're indulging your ego and abusing the audience. Don't do it. The point of the intro is to get you on the stage well prepared for what they need. Then I set up my through line, the whole point of my presentation. So what? Which happens to be also fun because it knocks me off any pedestal. We don't care about your credentials. What are you going to do for me today, Ron? Which is exactly right. Then what happened after she set me up, I started with the same through line. My opening line was, so what? And I immediately jumped into why that matters. And then I gave you the through line. What I've done is I've set you up for everything that follows, which is what your intro and your beginning to a story needs to do. You're getting off the ground well, to use that airline example again. So once you've got your start, you have to give some thought to the route you're going to follow. And in this handout, item 4 contains a number of thoughts about that. How many elements do you need? Kelly said something about simplicity. Even the long format stories don't have 27 key elements. They have a relatively few embellished at length. If you've watched Mike Birbiglia, or if you've listened to Arlo Guthrie tell a story, that's what they do. They can tell a 20-minute story, but it hasn't got 200 points. It's got a relatively few, like in an aircraft. We're going to go over Denver. We're going to go up to Bozeman, Montana, come in over Montreal. We're going to start landing that sucker as we come down over Vermont, and we're going to put it on the ground in Boston. If you feel that urge to take yourself to Tokyo because you really, really love the Tokyo story, don't do it. You're taking your audience a third of a way around the world. Well, you can do it, but you better have a darn good reason. When I wrote my first novel, I have several novels out. When I wrote my first novel, one of my coaches told me that I would have to cut some of my favorite characters and favorite material in order for the story to work. And that is brutally difficult, but you must do it in order to get this nice through line that connects, segues, where you add drama or humor, which Natanya and John are going to tell you more about. And then you're going to see that framework showcased by Dwayne here in a little while, and later by Ryan. So we have to think about the path of the arc of the story and how the pieces are going to get them there. Then you're going to have to road test it and refine it. And if you follow Darren LaCroix, former world champ, also an accredited speaker and runs Stage Time University, what he says over and over again is you're going to have to craft and recraft and adjust and tweak and modify and trial and do it again and again and again. He says some of his best lines have been revised hundreds of times in order to get them right, because that's what it takes to really get an audience with a killer story. So you've done all that. You have to take a giant step back then and give some thought. Does this thing actually work? Does it get us where we need to be? Is it in service to the audience? And then we go back and do final revisions. So that's the arc of the story. That's how to use the toolkit. You can overlay this on what Kelly provided you as you begin to build your stories. It's literally designed to be a checklist as you go through. And again, Natanya and John are going to add to that. So I told you the real point here is to get you into practice. So I want to do one quick little trick here. If 10 is that you all are going to knock yourselves out using today's material, and 1 is, oh, hell no, I ain't going to do anything, squat after today, post between 1 and 10 in the chat box for me. 10 means you're going to rock this stuff. 1 means you're not going to do squat. An 11! Oh, so another 11, 8s and 9s. Nobody's going to post a 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, look at that. Well, maybe someone will put, maybe one of you is really a 1, but you're going to lie and tell us it's a 10. Okay, so here's why I did that. If our goal is to get you into practice, this is goal setting, just by asking you to commit to that, we greatly increase the likelihood that you will take this to practice, which is one of my key themes for what I've been doing. That's my take home for you, is to get it into practice. So a closing quick thought. The best feedback I ever got before I became an accredited speaker or won those titles came when I delivered what I believed was a killer piece in front of a large audience. And I got big applause and I thought, man, I'm rocking the house. One of my trusted friends came up afterward and said, Ron, you're good, but damn it, you left me behind. There was nothing in this for me. So why did you even use this stage to talk to me? And it was like a dagger in my heart. Oh, right. When I start becoming wrapped up in myself and forget that it has to serve the audience, I have misused that space. That, my friends, is a take home. Amanda?
Thank you so much, Ron. You get a pom-pom of awesomeness. Thank you so much. I know I am learning a ton. First of all, heads up for Boston. I feel like that is a wonderful thing because that's where I'm from. And so I appreciate your example. And it did hit home when you said, don't go to Tokyo trying to get to Boston. I think that's a great way to look at it, because often we're talking to our audience and we're so excited about what we're saying that we don't realize that it is hard for them to connect the dots and follow. One of my mentors, he told me, don't be cute in sacrifice of clarity. And I think that really goes along with it. Like, just because it's cute or it's fun, if the audience doesn't get it, if they aren't able to follow along, then you've lost the whole thing altogether. So I love that example. I hope everyone is getting a lot out of this workshop. Can I see a whoop whoop, yay, I'm learning? Yay! I was just trying to see if you guys are still here with me. And you are, oh, and CB's got a pom-pom too, look at that, hey! I have to admit though, CB is the originator of this pom-pom, so I cannot take credit. I totally copied her. Fair warning, I don't know if I even asked, but sometimes you just gotta copy things when they are awesome. And, interpret it in your own way. And I think that's important to realize as well. So I don't know about you guys, but I've had plenty of coffee, which means I think it's time that we take a little break, just a little break. It will be about 15 minutes long, and we are ahead of schedule, which I feel like is like a Toastmaster record to be ahead of schedule and maybe rambling on for too long. But coming back from our break, we will have a drama and a humor section. And if you've ever talked to me before, you already know I am very excited about both of these segments. And I think there's going to be some good stories coming up too. I hear a little rumor. Somebody mentioned Dwayne's name. I don't know if we might have a world champion of public speaking in the room who just might give us a story. So if nothing else, you got to come back for that, because how often do you get to see him speak live? That's all I'm saying. So without further ado, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We will go on break for 15 minutes and then we will come back. Feel free to stay and chat. I am going to go ahead though and put a little countdown timer up for you guys so that you know when to come back. And otherwise, well, let's see, what time is it right now? It is 9:53. So that puts us back at what, 10:07? Somewhere there. When this hits 0, I'll be back on your screen, having you come on back. So thank you guys. We'll see you in just a bit. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed my sweet little countdown timer. I don't have to get it off my screen. Oh, we could just stop share, huh? That would be smart of me. I hope everybody had a good break. Hopefully you guys were able to refresh and that music just, you know, put you in a good mood if you did listen to it. If you didn't, well, I'm in a good mood, so I don't know. I mean, at least Joe and I had a good time. That's all I'm saying. Yay, Joe. Welcome back, everyone, to our second half of today's workshop. This is not part 2, however, so just keep that in mind. There is going to be another day coming up for you all. We are going to continue on, but this time we're going to continue with some drama. And if nobody here has ever seen me, you will realize I am not dramatic at all. So I'm not looking forward to this segment at all. But okay, that's a lie. Yes, I am. I love drama and I love humor, and I am super excited to share with you guys today some learnings about all of the humor and the drama. And I just want to let you guys know before we jump into our next segment that we will be having a survey at the end that we would love for you guys to take. So just a heads up on that. But I think that it is time for us to continue rolling. Are you guys ready to learn a little bit of drama? Give me 2 thumbs up. Woo woo! All right. I like it. I like all these happy faces that I can actually see, and people didn't just run away and turn off their cameras. All right, let's go ahead and roll on into our next segment with none other than Natanya Walker with It's What You Say and How You Say It. Maya Angelou once said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." How much time do we spend crafting the dramatic effect of a story? Do you guys even do it at all? Well, probably not enough to really make us feel. And that's the point of our next segment. Yes, she is more than our past district director. Today, she will be our drama coach and trainer. Give it up for Natanya Walker and It's What You Say and How You Say It. Ooh.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. What a fantastic morning we've had so far. Thank you, Kelly and Ron, for helping us to learn how to identify stories that we already have and how to begin with the end in mind and have a through line. Now we get to talk about how to add drama, or should I say, to be able to pull out the feelings behind the story that you're telling. You know, it's more than just the subject and the words. It's really about feelings. To get us started, here's what I'd like to do. I've got an activity. If you would, this is going to require you in chat. I want you to think back on a story that someone has told you. Maybe this particular story, all they used were words. You know, hi, once upon a time, there was this, well, you get the point. Write in chat using 1 or 2 words how that made you feel. Let's see what you've got. Blah. I hear ya. Oh, Gail says sad. What else do you have here? Amused, bored. Yeah, unenthusiastic, suspicious. That's exactly what happens. All right, now here's what I want you to do next. Think about a story that you have heard that had words, but also incorporated drama. Now, how did that make you feel? Type that in chat. Excited, involved, oh, interested, engaged, exactly. And that's the premise of our session today. We're going to talk about that. As a matter of fact, I want to point out, when you have the stage, and when I say stage, you don't have to be a public speaker to tell a story. I mean, stories are applicable with your family, if you're entertaining. Maybe it's with your team and you're trying to get a point across or an idea. Whenever the spotlight is on you, you want to make sure that you tell that story and tell it effectively. Here's something you've probably heard before. You ever heard this cliche? It's not what you say, but how you say it, probably have. But I suggest you get rid of it. Yeah, trash it. Look, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Instead, I suggest you reframe it and say it's what you say and how you say it are important. No doubt. They matter. So does how you say the words. You see, your feelings when they're conveyed is really what moves an audience to action, to buy your product or your service, agree with your idea or your concept, or to get a laugh. You know, at the end of the day, it is not but, it's and. All right, hey, look, let's try this exercise. I'm going to tell you this story real quick. Let me stop my sharing here. Back in the day, and this is just me being intuitive, I believe back in the day, many, many years before, when man first existed, we once, as beings, emitted our feelings. Like we just telepathically sent a feeling to another. And then there came movement. There was pointing and different ways to make body movement, sending messages that aligned with those feelings. And later came sounds like, even different tones and paces. And lastly came words. And I believe those words really were just labels or the dressing around the feelings. Okay, let's bring it up to today. Have you ever noticed a baby, a newborn baby? The baby comes and mom and dad, they don't talk. I mean, the baby doesn't speak, but some kind of way, you know what that baby needs, and the baby seems to respond to you, that telepathic emittance of feelings. And then all of a sudden, the baby starts to make movements, reaching for things or grabbing or pulling down. And then comes sound, what I'd like to call rhythmic sound. Yeah, bah. You see, those rhythmic sounds bring vibration. Vibration carries. And then come the words. The words are last. Look, let me show you this. Here's what I mean here. When we think about the way we communicate, we tend to, sometimes it seems we minimize it, but I like to think of it in this form of a pie chart, with body language accounting for 55% of the way we communicate with one another. So that's the raising of a brow or the pointing. I don't know if past district director Kim Gibson's on the line, but if you've ever worked with Kim, she has this way of raising one brow and everybody around her knows what that one brow means. Or some of you may make motion. Perhaps you're emitting and adding this body language at a party. If you've got a significant other, you know what certain body language and movement means. And then 38% of how we communicate is our tone of voice. I like the way Ron started his introduction as he was giving the example, and then he went, oh, wait, and then he went to a different tone. It's important, depending on what your story is, to change your range, because it does make a difference. Also, the pace of what you say. And I don't like to leave out the rhythmic sound I mentioned. There's something that happens with and that rhythmic sound. 38% is tone. And look at this. Look at it, 7%. Only 7% of the words. Only 7% of the words we use. This is what it looks like. Now, for most of us, when we go to tell a story or deliver a message, we spend most of our times figuring out what we're going to say and practicing the words. But we don't spend enough time on body language and tone. You see, if you really want to emit feelings and move people to action, to sell, to buy, to agree, to laugh, it's so important that we focus not just on the words, but on the body language. That added with a few props, maybe clothing and some staging makes a huge difference. Here's what I suggest for you. When you're ready to tell your next story, I believe in terms of beginning with the end in mind, think about the feeling in your story. Draw a pie, take a slice of that pie out. And that slice is all about what you say. That's the amount of time you should spend on the words. The balance of that 93%, you should be focusing on how you say those words. That's where the difference lies. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to try an exercise. I want you real quick, look around your surroundings. It doesn't matter what you pick up. Just find something, pick it up, put it in front of you. It could be a pen, it could be a hairpin. It doesn't matter. Just put it right in front of you. Once you've got it, I want each of you keep your computers on mute or your phones on mute, but I want you to actively participate and I want you to be extremely vocal. I want you to close your eyes. Everyone, if you would, just close your eyes. And first, I'd like for us all to just take a deep breath in, exhale. One more deep breath in, and exhale again. Now I'd like for you to grab the feeling of love. I want you to experience love. What does love feel like? Now I'd like for you to continue with feeling love, but now add to that love a sound, just some sound, and say it aloud. Now to that feeling, that sound, I'd like for you to make a movement, a gesture that matches that feeling, that sound. Give a movement of love. What does that look like to you? All right, now I want you to continue in that feeling of love, make a sound, make a gesture, and take that object you found and offer it to someone else and do it in a loving way. Let's see. Take another deep breath and exhale. You can open your eyes now. That's drama. It's just that simple. You might say, oh, you know, Natanya, I'm not very dramatic. A lot of people say that, but I beg to differ. You just proved that if you go in and you identify with the feelings of your story, you can come up with matching, not just any humdrum body language or tone, but you begin to align your words, your feelings, your body language. Look, when you think about it, let's see if we can get this to work here. Every story has contrast, or most do. We talked about the quest and the lights. There was, in William's story, there was a father, his brother, himself. So sometimes you have to go in character and you have to change. Here's what I do. It's not scientific, but this is my magic. First, I focus on the feelings of my story. What are those emotions? I go inside and actually feel them. Second, I align my tone and my body language. Some messages I'm here, some messages I change my range or my tone. And then third, I align the words. Again, back to what Ron said about beginning with the end in mind. The end is what emotion, what change do I want my audience to experience? And first, I must experience. Now you say, Natanya, I can't do this. Well, look, we do it all day long. This guy's probably saying, hey, why'd you take all the money out of the bank account? You see his brow, you see his hand, and she's going, but honey, I didn't know you wanted a motorcycle, right? I don't know what she's saying, but that looks like it to me. And then what about this? When you think about passion, or you think about flirting, look at the folding of the hands, the tilting of the head. Everything is round and soft in the eyes. When you're telling your story, think of ways that you can emit this type of body language. Or what about this? Maybe there was rage. By the time William got back and his father found out he told everybody in town, all the kids, about the arm and the cooler, he was probably screaming at him, right? So what does that look like? It's straight lines, it's pointed, mouth is open, or maybe I can't stand it or hear it. Or what about this? This little fellow's going, I've got a secret. And mom's going, shh. She's using that rhythmic sound, shh, and leaning in and really adding to her story. Or what about these ladies? What might they be saying with their body language? Maybe they're congratulating one another, a couple little prop with the glasses, or maybe, just maybe, they're plotting. Look at the eyes. We'll get them this time. Look, we use body language all the time. The key is just to be natural, to be yourself and apply it. You see, emotions, well, emotions will actually move the heart. And when you show those feelings and emotions, well, frankly, the heart moves the audience. How do you do this? Well, I like to think of tone and pace really important, especially with Zoom. Well, we don't have a lot of stage time, so most of us are on camera. It's so important to be mindful of our tone. For example, when you're talking about in a firm voice, it's usually an indication of a mood or maybe some assertiveness. You're trying to get across that you're direct or in charge, or maybe you're angry. Whereas a moderate tone is something like this, and it's a little bit more relaxed and cheerful and really exciting. And it's good, but even after a while, this gets boring. So you have to just build it up at some point. And then there's the soft voice that's unsure and meek and insecure. So depending on the characters and the placement in your story, you want to make sure that you mix up your story so that we can understand when we're getting to conflict, or whether we've gotten to resolution of the lesson. Also, speed makes a difference. Of course, if it's something cold, it's slow. And if it's something really, really hot or urgent, it's fast. Pausing is important. Pausing, especially if it's a serious story, allows your audience to really resonate and digest what you're trying to say to them. So slow down so that people can get your message. And then if it's humorous, then maybe this is a dramatic pause to go, bet you weren't expecting that one. Look, and always, always be enthusiastic. Look, a smile, I don't care who it is or where it comes from. People love it. It's universal. And when you smile, everyone smiles. And then there are props. There are always little things around. Here's one I use. You could take two simple little things on your desk, like gym clips. I'll grab these two and might say, oh, we were so closely linked together. But then all of a sudden, we started falling apart. Your audience will remember that. So here's another one, varied height. A little bit more challenging on camera, but whenever you vary your height, sit down on a stage, stand up, a stool, the audience will be more engaged and pay more attention. Look, the sharper and clearer the details of your story, the more memorable they'll be. And I don't just mean the words. Sure, you want to use vivid words, but what about vivid drama? Even if it's exaggerated, it can be a serious story, or maybe it's humorous. But exaggeration, even of your movements or your tone, can add to your story. Now, the thing is, we all have stories. You got them. You've got them in you, and Kelly did a fantastic job of showing us how to identify the stories and the fact to store them. But the point is, when you tell your story, you don't want to put people to sleep. You want them to be engaged and exciting and following behind you. I'll leave you with this. You want to own the stage. The stage could be in your home, in your bed. It could be in an office. But when you have the spotlight, you want to make sure you own the stage, and you do that by not telling your story, but rather reliving it. You also want to be yourself, because being yourself is memorable. Use props and little things to help make your story, and express your story with conviction, sincerity, enthusiasm, and vitality. One thing to remember is less equals more. Now, in your package, you've got an exercise sheet for home. I encourage you to take this sheet and practice. How would you use your body movement and your tone depending on your story? If it's a happy story, or you've got a part or segment of it that shows anger, how will you display that? Look, in the words of Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But look, people will never, ever, ever forget how you make them feel. So One last time, say it with me. It's what I say and how I say it. Amanda, back to you.
Woohoo! Natanya, thank you so much. Oh, I try to remember it's and not but or any of those other options. And you know, they teach you that if you guys have ever taken an improv class, that is a key attribute in improv as well as but and. You always have the and include everything in it and try to build on it and not be negative about it. Thank you so much. That was so fantastic. I love the drama. I love the pom-poms. It's such a good time. I hope you guys have got some great notes going on here. I know I have already taken, I don't even know, it's like a whole bunch of just on the ahas, like it's a whole bunch. I really enjoyed that concept of words are only 7%. Like when you pulled that up, my mind was just like, really? Only 7%? That blows me away and really shows that you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out the exact words to say, but if you don't deliver it well, if you don't practice, if you don't get up at a Toastmasters meeting and actually give a speech, then you're missing the vast majority of the point. Whew. Are you guys ready though? Because I feel like it's time that we consider laughter. Yes? No? Because, you know, somebody once said, laughter is the greatest medicine. And I agree. One of my all-time favorite people was Lucille Ball, because she just embodied laughter and just being herself. And, you know, she's also a redhead, and maybe that has something to do with it. But I'm ready to learn more about humor. I don't know about you guys. So let's go on to that with the one, the only, John Matthews, a DTM, and yes, a district winner of the Humorous Contest, which, in case you guys didn't know, we are in Humorous Contest season. So I think you should all be feverishly taking notes if you are considering that, because I'm pretty sure areas start in October. And that's going to be a good time. So to learn about the appropriate use of humor, which is a great title, John, I just have to point that out because I think sometimes we need to know that too. But humor is the perfect flourish for a story. It's a lot like forecasting the weather, part science and part art. Our next trainer has a degree in meteorology. No, seriously, he's literally a meteorologist. I think that's amazing. But he also won the Humor District contests. So that makes him a funny weatherman. And he loves to teach what makes humor pop. So presenting the appropriate use of humor, let's all give it up for Mr. John Matthews.
Well, thank you, Amanda. You know, you talked about the appropriate use of humor, and boy, wouldn't it be a lot more fun to talk about the inappropriate use of humor? But we need to keep this PG rated. For those of you out there, I want to start with one question right off the bat. How many of you have ever thought, I'm not funny? Like, I can't do it. I'm not funny. It's just me. I see a lot of hands going up. The presentation today is going to address a lot of the questions you have to overcome those fears. We're going to be working off this handout from the package. And there's some fill-ins in there for the material that we will go over. But first, I want to start with a little exercise with you in chat about different occasions and using humor. And when do you use humor? So let's say you're at a roast of someone. Would it be appropriate to use humor? Type yes or no, or type some comment in the chat. Let's see what you think about a roast. Okay, yes, 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 yes at the roast, of course. You guys are pretty much unanimous that at a roast, it's okay to use humor. How about at a funeral? Is it okay to use humor at a funeral? Okay, I'm seeing some yeses, some nos, some maybes. So it's a little bit more of a mixed bag for a funeral. All right, third situation. You're at a company meeting where layoffs have been announced. Is it okay to use humor? No, big no, absolutely not. So you guys are pretty clear that if you're announcing layoffs, you don't want to use humor. So when it comes down to when to use humor, we've seen a case where you can use it, where you maybe not. And if you've been to a funeral, a true Irish wake, you're laughing one moment from a story and then you're crying at the next moment. So it can go both ways. At layoffs, we talked about the inappropriate use of humor. That would be a not funny, inappropriate humor during layoffs. So really the first point in the handout, humor needs to honor the people in attendance and the occasion. You need to honor the people in attendance and the occasion when you use humor. Now, why would you use humor? That's the next segment. As Natanya shared, drama is used to evoke an emotion. Humor, the great part about it, humor is just for entertainment. But science has proven that when you laugh, your body produces endorphins. Now, endorphins, when they start flowing through your bloodstream, those are those feel-good chemicals. Now, when endorphins flow, here's something that's proven by science, people feel more relaxed. So when they're laughing, people feel more relaxed. Now, people become more creative and able to focus when the endorphins hit their bloodstream when they're laughing. And now when they're more creative and they're able to focus, that's when your company is ready for brainstorming in a meeting, or that's when you're ready to journey into some tougher material that's ahead. So you want your audience laughing at times so they get those endorphins and they're feeling good. Now, where in your story would you want to use humor? Now, traditionally, you would say in your opening, right in the opening, to warm the crowd. You want to hook the crowd. Everyone talks in Toastmasters, you need an exciting opening. Well, if you use humor, you warm up the audience. Hey, they're laughing. Remember, they're going to feel good, and then you have them. Sometimes you want to use humor in a different way, though. When the material gets too heavy, if you've been going through a lot of drama, if you're going through a tough time, hey, remember, laughter makes people feel good. So to add in a laugh line into your story, it can make it easier to navigate through that heavy moment. Now, one time to absolutely do not use humor is when you are hammering home a serious point, when you're making the point, the ask, this is the reason you told your story, and you make a joke in there, and it takes away from your point. You don't want to do that. When you are telling a story that makes a point and it's serious, don't confuse the audience with a joke. Talked about when, talked about why, talked about where in your story to use humor. Now for the real hard part. How do you generate humor? I don't know. I'm hoping you guys can help me. No. How do you generate humor? The best way is to tell stories. And now I know you're thinking, like, we're at a storytelling workshop. Like, isn't it obvious that you would tell stories, right? Well, here's the reason you would want to tell stories. This is not stand-up comedy. The bar to get laughter when you're telling a story is so much lower. When you're doing stand-up comedy, it's not even here. I mean, stand-up comedy is as hard as it gets to make people laugh time and time again. When you're telling stories, the level comes down here. And if you're worried about getting laughter, you lower the bar and it's easier to get that laughter. Now, that lets you go for, instead of working punchlines, you can just have the low burn of some awkward situations that can be humorous. So tell stories. Now, in that story, you want to have an unexpected twist. An unexpected twist. That's one of the blanks on the sheet. The point of that is you let your audience get out ahead of you, and then you change the direction. In comedy, you would say it's 1, 2, banana. Because for all of you, I know you were thinking 1, 2, 3. But where'd the banana come from? And there is the unexpected twist. Now, another way to get some humor in your stories is exaggerate. Bend the truth in your story. You can do it a little or even a lot. That this isn't politics. There's no one following you around in your story, fact checking you, saying, yeah, I don't think William was really there with the arm in the cooler. Like, it didn't happen that way. Like, that's not happening. So you can exaggerate. And if you've ever heard a fishing story, the exaggeration comes in that they're never telling you that they're getting a little fish like this. I mean, it's always, what are they getting? It's not even this, it's Jaws. I mean, they're out fishing, they're in a lake somewhere, and they're reeling in Jaws, right? And then you turn out it was that big. But the humor comes in the exaggeration of the story. Another way is to add a warped perspective to the story. Imagine you're telling the story. Like Natanya said, you're reliving a story. And then imagine for a moment, you step out of the story and you look at the situation that's going on. For instance, let's say I was telling you a story that this past Sunday, I was on the couch, I had the football on, the Falcons are doing great, it's halftime. And I thought to myself, this is where I step out of the story, I thought to myself, they're way ahead. This game's in the bag. I mean, when's the last time that they ever... Is it too soon to talk about that? I'm thinking it's a little too soon. I'm seeing some nods in there. So that's a warped perspective. Step out of the story and bring some other viewpoint into the presentation. The final way to get some stories that are humorous is kids. Kids say the darndest things. I like to share a story that my daughter and I had where one time we're walking in a store and we're going down one of the aisles and she says, "Daddy, do you know if you use Charmin Ultra Soft, you can go an extra day without changing your underwear?" I do it all the time. Now this is like horrible to live through, but in hindsight, there is some comedy gold in the words of a child. You may think, I don't have kids. Well, get a kid. It's COVID. There's parents all over the place that are sick of their kids. You can probably just like borrow a kid from someone and the parents won't even want them back. You can get a kid on the cheap right now during COVID. Now, the final point I want to share with you, what if your audience doesn't laugh when you're telling a story? And is that your biggest fear of I'm not funny? The biggest fear is you tell something and they don't laugh. What do? Keep going. Just keep going with your story. They may think you're making a serious point. Remember, this isn't stand-up. You're not going to have hecklers, chiding you. This is usually a good audience that's hearing your story. And remember, laughter is a bonus. It is not a requirement when you're telling a story. It's required in stand-up. In a story, it's just a bonus. So I want to encourage you that if you think you can't do humor, you can. If you apply these principles, you can get humor into your stories and get your audience laughing. Now, I have some homework for you. And I know you're thinking, like, that's a joke, right? No, it's not a joke. I have some homework for you. Think of something that happened to you that's embarrassing. Think of something that's embarrassing. It's not for today. This will come in handy for next week. So over the next week, think of something embarrassing that's happened. And then ask yourself, how can I exaggerate what happened in that story? Or how can I step out and add a warped perspective?
I'm going to clean the bathrooms today.
Okay. And with that, I hope that you guys have all the tools to add humor into your speeches. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you, John Matthews. If you don't have a kid, get a kid. I think that might be one of my big takeaways. Thankfully, I have 3 stepchildren. I don't need to do that. So, and a dog, which sometimes feels like having a kid, and you can definitely get some good, funny stories out of your pets. As you all are probably well aware, if you've ever heard me give a speech, he's probably been in it, and there you have it. Good stuff. I just love humor anyway, so I appreciate you, John. I think that at this point, we need to hear another story. And who better for us to hear a story than from District 44's and Speaker Roundtable's very own 2002 winner of the world champion of public speaking, Dwayne G. Smith. Now, before I let him speak, I do want to let you know, after he speaks, we are going to go into breakout rooms and analyze his story. Oh yes, not only do you get to hear him speak, then you actually get to think about it and think what maybe he did well as far as what we've been talking about, and maybe what he could improve upon. Interesting. So if you want to take a look at those questions in advance, you can. They're in the handout. They'll also be in the chat. Or if you want to sit back and enjoy this opportunity of listening to Dwayne, I don't blame you. Do that too. In A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens wrote, "It was the best of times. It was the worst of times." This certainly applies to the experience of a little black boy growing up in the South in the 1960s, where every day was a day of fun and racism was a part of life. Dwayne will share his story and the powerful lessons that he learned that transcend time. Let's all welcome Dwayne G. Smith as he presents Turn Me Around.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking to freedom land. One of my favorite songs from the 1960s civil rights era is Turn Me Round, because it heralded in my coming of age on a day that started out just like any other day, but didn't quite end the way I would have liked. It was a sunny summer day in Griffin, Georgia. My best friend, Benny, and I were having fun. We always got together. We did everything together. He was my best friend, and we had a wonderful time. Every day was an adventure. Sometimes we would go out and we would catch green snakes, the harmless ones, and we would put them in our shirt pockets. And then we'd find a girl, preferably an older one, and say, "Hey, look what's in my pocket." And they'd run off screaming. We had a ball doing that. Now, on this day, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do as we were standing in the front yard. As we were talking, we noticed a bunch of people coming up the road. By the time they reached us, Benny said, "Hey, what y'all doing?" And the guy said, "We're having a civil rights march. You want to join in? Come on." Benny looked at me. I looked at Benny, and we jumped right in. Now, we were a little disappointed at first because we thought that when you were in a civil rights march, you should be marching. But they just walked. But it was an adventure. We ended up at City Hall, and City Hall was like a typical small town government building where you have a big building that's all brick. It has about 6 or 7 rows of steps. At the top of that is a landing, and then there's the doors. Now at the bottom is the street and then the road. The leaders of this group were at the bottom, and they would be giving the speeches and instructions and things. But the rest of us, many of us, were sitting on those steps. I was on the 5th row. I had a bird's eye view of everything that was happening. And I was looking for Benny because we had become separated on the way over there. I found out later that Benny had turned around and gone home. Smart kid. Because a little while later, I saw this white man coming through the crowd, all these crowd of black people. He was coming through as if he owned the place. He must have thought he was Moses or somebody coming to part the Black Sea. And so he comes to the first step and they let him through, and the second step, and I'm saying, why are they letting this man through? We're having a protest. and he's killing the party. But he ends up on my row, and he stands in front of the smallest person on that row. So now I'm looking between his legs and trying to figure out or get some directions from the leaders. What am I to do? Do you want me to let him go through? Or do you want me to stop him? I'm 11 years old. I don't know what to do. Tell me something. But I'm getting nothing. And so I said, I'm just going to ignore him. We were singing this song. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. He saw I wasn't doing anything, and then he moved down the road. Thank you, Jesus, because I did not want to deal with that grown man. Now, nobody else down the road is moving. And that's a good thing. Until he comes right back and stands in front of me again, as if I didn't see his big old behind the first time. Only this time, he wants to have a conversation. And he says to me, I have an important meeting in that building. You need to get out of my way. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And then he said something that really caught my attention. If you don't get out of my way, I'm going to the police station and I'm going to have them arrest every one of you. You're gonna spend the night in jail, boy. I stopped singing because I thought of my mama. If she had to get me out of jail, she would be very upset. And I would be sore for the next 30 years. But what do? I don't want to let him go through. So I did what any young man coming of age would do. I closed my eyes and tried to wish him away. Please, 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 go away, please. But he wasn't going. And I wasn't moving. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And so he stood there and waited. Turn me around, turn me around. And still, he waited. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Finally, he turned around. Keep on walking, keep on walking. That was a hollow victory because I knew that soon and very soon, calamity was about to commence because chaos was coming. I could see in my mind angry white men wearing dark blue uniforms, carrying long black nightsticks, looking for dark brown heads, bringing bright red blood. What have I done? And then I saw the strangest thing. One of the leaders was smiling. Here we are about to get massacred, and he's smiling. And he was smiling, and she was. And they were all smiling at me. It was a smile of pride, a smile of honor, a smile of respect, a smile that said, you did well, young man. You did very well. When I saw those smiles, some of the fear that I had began to fall off of me. And it was replaced by strength, my own inner strength and the strength of this crowd, the strength of the movement all over the country. And I finally realized why we were here. This was no adventure. We were here to change the world so that young boys and young girls in the future would not have to go through the same things that we went through. They would not have to drink water from a water fountain marked colored and be banned from one that marked white, as if they had some kind of disease. We were there to change the world. So who was I to allow one man to turn me around? Even though this one man was 5 times bigger than me and with one hand could have picked me up and tossed me away easily. But that was not about to be, not with all my newfound friends all around me. And so we knew what was about to come. They continued to make their speeches. We continued to sing. And this went on and on until nightfall. We dispersed and we began to walk home. I would love to say that there were no problems that night. I would love to say that everybody made it home okay. But there was violence. And it all came from my mama. Boy, don't you ever leave this house and tell nobody where you going. But mama, don't you bet mama me. Although the day didn't end the way I wanted it to end, I learned some valuable lessons. I learned that no matter how small or insignificant you think you are, you're wrong, because you can change the world. I learned that no matter how big your obstacles or people that are in your way, stand your ground. Let no one turn you around. And I learned that if you're ever going off to save the world, you better leave a note for your mama. And keep this song in your hearts. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking to freedom land. Over to you, Madam DJ.
Whew. Wow. Thank you, Dwayne. That is an amazing story. And I'm sure you did not cross your mama again. No, that seems, I'm not going to cross your mama if I, no. I learned that quick too. Like, you don't cross mama. Or other people's mamas either. That's, no. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Dwayne, for that amazing story. What we're going to do now is actually go to some breakout rooms of about 4 to 5 people, just depending on how things work out. There are questions in your handout. However, we are going to drop those questions in the chat as well. They are discussion questions about Dwayne's story. The first one says, based on what you've learned today, what are the most effective techniques Dwayne used to create a killer story? And then number 2, what suggestions would you give Dwayne to make the story better? Oh, you gotta put your thinking hats on there. There are additional optional questions if you guys get through these 2 relatively quickly. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 additional questions if you do have for that. And then when you do get in your breakout room, somebody does need to be the leader. And our idea is that you have whoever is alphabetically at the beginning of the alphabet with their first name. So like myself with an A, probably would have been a leader on that one. But otherwise, we will give you until 11:10 to be in these breakout rooms as these questions discuss not only this, but anything else you guys have learned today. And our master, Rick, of all these things. Oh, thank you, Gail. She just posted all those questions in the chat if you did not have the handout. But I think we're gonna go ahead and send you guys off into breakout room land. Oh, and there we go. We'll see you on the other side. 11:10. That is your time. I'm gonna have that song in my head. Dun, 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 dun. Is this fun time where we're gonna call on you guys to tell us what you have learned. I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit here and there, but with your ahas, can you see that? The ahas and the takeaways. Hopefully you all have some of these. And what we're going to do is have one of our special speakers roundtables members come on and run this, but she is going to be looking for 1 to 2 phrases, short words, short phrases, just your key things that you have learned today in a short amount of time, and she'll let you, you can either put them in the chat, or she is going to be calling on some people to come on camera like this and speak what they have learned. We're going to utilize the participants option there to raise hands. If you guys are unfamiliar with that, when you click on participants at the bottom of the screen next to the chat icon, you can see all the names of everybody that is here, and you can see if you have the chat open, you can actually click more. Where is it? Well, let me get the chat out of here so I can tell you what I'm talking about. You should be able to raise hands in that function. However, without further ado, oh, and if you do go super long, you will not get a red light like in table topics, but our master Rick may have to mute you so we can move on. We're going to try to get about 10 to 12 people on camera and telling us about their ahas, what they have learned, and their key takeaways. So Nyasha Russell, Speakers Roundtable's very own, would you be so kind as to potentially explain that again, maybe in a clearer method, and take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. And to reiterate what she said, you have now the opportunity to share a couple of aha moments, 1 to 2 phrases, 5 to 7 words. For example, my aha moment was don't leave the audience behind. That was like 5. Had a couple of words left over, but make sure that you're short and sweet. And if you want to comment, you can leave your aha moments in the chat box, or you can raise your hand as she mentioned, I will call on you. Just make sure that when you do that, you unmute yourself so that we can hear you. So I'm gonna be looking for raised hands, and I see Mr. Joe Sasso. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I'm unmuted, yes. A couple of things that we came up with in our chat group was how he was supported by the energy of the crowd, and they made him feel proud to be there with them.
All right, Mr. Joe, thank you so much. Again, make sure that we are 1 to 2 phrases, 5 to 7 words. So reiterate that one more time in 5 to 7 words, real quick.
He was powered by the energy of the crowd, and he was supported and felt proud to be there.
Okay, great. Now, anyone else moving forward, if you would like to share your takeaways from Dwayne's speech, great. But we want you to kind of share any takeaways, aha moments that you have from the entire workshop. Let's call on Cheryl, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name, so I apologize. Cheryl B. Please please unmute yourself.
My aha moment is don't tell stories, relive them.
Nice. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Earl King.
Hey, Nyasha.
Hey, Earl.
I had a lot of aha moments, but I love the aha moment related to humor and how it relaxes the audience and allows them to be more creative and focused, and the body releases endorphins.
Thank you so much, Earl. I appreciate it very much. How about Stephen Box? 5 to 7 words, Stephen, quick.
It's important to always have something that runs through the speech to connect to everything too.
Thank you, Stephen. And what about Akilish P? Please unmute yourself and share.
Hi, my takeaway is keep the end in mind.
Nice, definitely. Amy Smithers, please unmute yourself and share.
My big takeaway was think emotions first and words last.
Thank you so much. Al Wiseman, please unmute yourself.
My biggest takeaway was to use the 4 steps to the hero's journey: quest, obstacles, resolution, and new wisdom as a framework for your stories.
Very nice. You guys are taking excellent notes. And what about Dwayne Humphrey? Unmute yourself, please.
Stories stick like glue.
Stories stick like glue.
Say it one more time.
Stories stick like glue.
Stories stick like glue. Great. And what about Miss Barbara Morgan? Please unmute yourself and share.
It's what you say and how you say it.
All right, perfect. Now, Amanda, I know that we were on a time crunch and we have some comments in the chat. Did you want to share those? You want me to keep going? Please instruct. What would you like?
We have time for one more comment if somebody else has something to say, and then we will move on from there.
Perfect. Miss Lena, would you like to share?
Yes.
Please unmute yourself.
I think our team today learned to move with purpose, and this is the best animation, the movement, how he moved with purpose that we have learned.
Move with purpose. Thank you very much. And with that being said, Amanda, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyasha. I don't know what I was trying to say there, but it didn't come out quite right, so I apologize. I am so glad you guys have learned so much, and thank you all who came on and were brave to say hey and speak up with what you have learned. It is important to reiterate, and it's important to hear things from other people, other perspectives, to remind ourselves of these things. There were some great ones in the chat as well for the ahas, the keepers, whatever you want to call them. We had Anna Marie. She said, act the story to incorporate the audience. Absolutely. People like to see you act things out. I love that. You guys can keep putting those in the chats if you want. If you have anything else, that is fantastic. But I'm really looking forward to seeing you all take this learning and put it into action and get your stories to the next level. I think we really should just close out with we have a few more minutes, but we're going to close out with one more story, and then I'll just wrap it up at the end for you all. Just so you guys can really use those ahas and see it in play, and maybe it'll help reinforce as well. So let's move to that. All right, Ryan Rizzo will be our next speaker. He is also a member of the Speakers Roundtable, and he's got a great story to give you guys a good example today. Every day of our lives, doors open for us and doors close. Choosing which to walk through and which to bypass determines the arc of our lives. Join our speaker, Ryan Rizzo, as he navigates a very significant doorway in his life and the life-altering choice that it offered. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Rizzo.
My heart was in my throat. I was staring at the inside of two stainless steel doors, listening to the steady hum of the elevator. My wife's hand and mine were grasped tightly, and the dampness that was sticking our palms together offered silent testimony of our nervous anticipation. Considering the hour, I suppose it was no surprise that we were there by ourselves. And for a few quiet moments, we had time to consider what was about to happen. When the elevator's upward movement stopped, and as those doors slid open, a new future was opening with them. The rhythmic echoes of our footsteps off of the hard hospital floors accompanied us as we negotiated the maze of overly bright hallways, looking for room 327. Room 327, where a pregnant young woman was in labor. A young woman who my wife and I had only met for the first time just 1 month earlier. A young woman who was about to give birth to our child. So let's rewind a bit to that earlier day when we had first met Sarah. My wife and I were filled with a mixture of nerves and eager anticipation. We had never even spoken with her before. We had only communicated with her through a letter that we had written, which began with the unlikely salutation of, "Dear Birth Mother." We had produced and circulated dozens of these letters through various personal and medical channels, and one was guided into Sarah's hands. Now, there must have been something in the words, or perhaps beyond the words, that resonated with her, and we learned that she was interested to meet with us as potential adoptive parents of her unborn child. So, talk about an audition. Agatha Christie once said that one doesn't recognize the really important moments in one's life until it's too late. But no, we didn't suffer from that lack of vision. We knew full well that the meeting that we were about to enter would determine our future of forming a family. Yeah, no pressure whatsoever. But we weren't the only ones under pressure. Sarah was 18 a senior in high school, and 8 months pregnant. The reaction from her family had been understandably somewhat less than enthusiastic over her pregnancy. And their reaction to her decision to carry the baby to full term and pursue adoption left her feeling isolated and alone. This isolation, however, was offset by her sense of absolute certainty that the path that she had chosen was the right path for both herself and her baby. And by her own admission, once she set her mind to a course of action, her defining characteristic was that she was stubborn as a mule. Now, she may have made the wrong choice in the circumstances leading to her getting pregnant, but she was stubborn enough, strong enough, even determined enough to make the right choice and carry her pregnancy through, in spite of the social pressures and family discord, physical demands, and overall disruption of her very young life. She was able to see her pregnancy not as a mistake, but as a blessing. She had the conviction to do right by the life that she was carrying inside of her. Now, Sarah was the picture of radiant, glowing health. At 5'2" with big brown eyes, she embodied the mixture of both the child that she had recently been, as well as the young woman that she was quickly becoming. So we met, we talked, we cried, we connected. We felt an easy rapport, and we all allowed ourselves to take the path that had been so divinely and so clearly laid out for us. We were going to adopt Sarah's child. So fast forward, back to the hospital. My wife and I entered room 327, and each one held the hand of a young lady whom we barely knew, intertwining our fingers and our fates. And as she sweated and screamed and pushed a new life into the world, we were witnesses to her courageous decision to choose what was right over what was convenient. And before that night was through, one beautiful, exceptional, stubborn young lady gave birth to another. Occasionally, as I look into my daughter's big brown eyes, I'm reminded how, as each door opens in life, it opens in front of us, whether it slides open easily, or we have to use every fiber of our being to force it open. And then we pause on the threshold, deciding whether or not to step through, that each choice that we make, each door that we take, can be life-altering and abundantly meaningful. Miss MC.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure that that touched many of us in listening. Whew. How do you follow these stories? I'll tell you what, that is a task in and of itself. I'm like, okay, all right, I can do this. Thank you guys all for coming. That does conclude all of our learning and all of our stories. I want to say a special thank you, of course, to our leaders and all of our trainers and our storytellers. This was fantastic. I do want to let you know this, though, is only part one. There is still a part two, as I had mentioned at the beginning, and that will be next Saturday, October 3rd, same time, 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, as our weatherman pointed out to us earlier. We are in Eastern Daylight Time right now. Kind of threw me off there. And we will have a different Zoom link. So please make sure you register for part two. If you have anybody else that you think will be benefiting from this, of course, they're not going to get this exact thing. It's going to be different next week, but have them come and join us anyways. Of course, if you're not able to make it next week, that is okay. We would love to see you at Speakers Roundtable any Tuesday evening. We meet from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And of course, the district says come and check out any club. Most of our clubs are meeting on Zoom right now. So if you loved this, you're not a part of Toastmasters, please check out the Toastmasters website, the district's website. Our district Facebook page is nice too. And join in on the fun. Learn to be a better communicator. I will remind you, for part 2, there is some homework. This is in your chat. Oh, that's upside down. Okay, all right. I got this, you guys. It's not upside down anymore. We do have some homework for you guys to expand upon this learning and to work on your personal stories. Don't forget to make your little story file. I know I'm going to be all over that. And there also is a survey. We're asking you guys, it's on here somewhere. We're going to, you know what, we'll put the link in the chat. There is a survey. We ask you guys to let us know how we did, if we could improve upon anything, if you have any suggestions for any of our speakers, any of our storytellers, or